I think, you know, what had happened in Minnesota over the weekend is every elected official's worst nightmare.
This morning on Inside Kansas Politics, lawmakers reacting to the tragic murder of a Minnesota lawmaker. It's the latest in a string of attacks targeting politicians. What to know about the shooting this morning. Plus,
Kansas cannot survive a double dose of this extreme agenda.
On the campaign trail, Democrats are pushing back against the Trump administration. Cindy Holshore announcing her run for Kansas governor, where she stands on some of the state's top issues. That's still ahead. And ICE trying to secure more detention beds for mass deportations, why a Kansas prison is becoming a top priority. And that's where we start this morning. Thanks for watching Inside Kansas Politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. ICE signing a deal with CoreCivic, a private prison company in Fort Leavenworth. Now, a judge requiring the company to get a special permit to reopen earlier this month. This was up in the air before, with CoreCivic now renamed the Midwest Regional Detention Center, caught in the middle of a lawsuit with the city. The prison argued that it didn't need the permit because it never abandoned the facility when they closed in 2021. Right now, ICE has been trying to more than double detention beds for mass deportations, going from 41,000 to about 150,000. The government is expediting the process, signing deals without going through the bid process. They're justifying it with President Trump declaring a state of emergency at the border.
We try to stay out of the policies of immigration, and our primary responsibility is providing the service to the government and fulfilling their needs.
The facility in Leavenworth is one of 9 potential detention centers that would be contracted for operations for 5 years. Then we're here now with State House correspondent for the Associated Press, John Hanna. And John, I was looking at your report on this situation.
Yeah.
So this is part of a trend we're seeing across the country when it comes to this. What are some of the key takeaways that you have when looking into something like this?
Well, one of the key takeaways is that the Trump administration has been doing a lot of activity with ICE contracts since Trump took office in January. There are dozens of contract modifications that it's done. There are also what are known as letter contracts. One at the Leavenworth facility is under what's that. It's a kind of a quick contracting process. One critic we talked to said it's normally used for minor changes. This is a fairly big one. And so they're doing all this activity and trying to do it as quickly as possible to get as many beds as they can get online as quickly as possible to hold people who entered the U.S. illegally and are living in the U.S. illegally, awaiting deportation.
Okay. And I know that you mentioned that there was a lot of oversight issues prior. One of the reasons that this facility was shutting down in 2021, a lot of abuse when it came to that. If this facility were to reopen, who would be in charge, I think, is one of the big questions of oversight when it comes to this facility?
Well, ICE and ICE would set the standards, and CoreCivic, in this case, there's another big private prison company, Geo Group, based in Florida, that is also in the mix all over the country. They would operate those under contracts. The contracts would set what they have to do, and of course ICE would just set standards for conditions and that sort of thing. I have heard arguments from people who support reopening the prison in the town that in some ways this is a less difficult job for CoreCivic. Formerly, the facility was for the U.S. Marshal Services, and they were holding prisoners who were arrested on felony charges and awaiting trial. So, you know, potentially dangerous people, many of them with mental illnesses, arguably, and so a more difficult population to manage than this population, many of whom, you know, they don't want to cause any more legal problems for themselves because, of course, they hope, if they're deported, they hope to get back someday. And in some cases, their only crime, and it's more of a civil violation than a criminal one, is crossing the border illegally and being here without the proper documentation. So, and you know, some of the folks in town say this will, you know, bring jobs. The allegations mainly dealt with two things: how prisoners were treated if they were, you know, basically if the facility was a little rough in handling them, if they, you know, disciplinary problems. And then there was a real question that the ACLU and federal public defenders also raised about staffing levels. There have been a couple of former employees who've come forward and said the prison was perpetually understaffed, and that created a lot of problems. You know, CoreCivic's argument is that they never abandoned the site, and you know, there was a tour earlier this year that they gave for reporters to take a look at it, and my colleagues who went said you could smell the disinfectant lingering in the air. So, you know, obviously somebody had gone through and cleaned it up recently before that visit. So, and CoreCivic's argument is we never left. We've always had at least a few employees on site. So that's why they don't think they need a permit. Of course, the issue for some members in the community is much broader than that, whether this prison should reopen at all. And we'll see how that plays out in court. So far, the state court judge who's handling it has sided with the city, but you know, CoreCivic is looking at its legal options, including a possible appeal. So we'll see how it works out.
All right, now moving on to the attack on lawmakers in Minnesota. A Minnesota state lawmaker was shot and killed in what's being called a politically motivated assassination. Former State House Speaker Democrat Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed in their home. Democrat Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were also shot about 9 miles away. Minnesota law enforcement named a suspect who previously worked with Hoffman, but it's not clear how well they knew each other. The suspect, identified as Vance Luther Belter, is now facing multiple murder charges, and he was placed into custody this week. So, John, lawmakers even here are shaken up by this situation,
right,
with the suspect allegedly planning to go after even more politicians.
Well, he did stop off at 2 other houses. At one house, the lawmaker was not home. At the other house, according to authorities, he got to the house, he sat in his car. The police had said that had heard about the shooting of Senator Hoffman. That was the first event in the chain. They said, go and check on this local lawmaker. The officer drove up beside his car, which had been tricked out to look like a police car, and tried to engage him in conversation. And when he wouldn't do that, the officer went on to the house and waited for backup, and so he just left. But authorities say he had a list of about 45 Minnesota elected officials, both state and federal. We've seen members of Congress confirm, members of Congress from I think at least 5 other states confirm that they were told they were on his list. Now, I want to be careful because it's not clear that it was one unified list. It may have been a list of names here, a list of names there, jottings here. So it's, you know, we have not seen his notebooks, of course, because they're probably holding those as part of the they are holding them, and it's probably because they're part of the investigation. And so we don't know, we don't have a full picture of what was in his notes, and of course they haven't given us a motive.
John, thank you so much. And another round of cuts now targeting historic areas in Kansas. What could happen if they don't get help from D.C.? That's next. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
What's for dinner? Shop Dillon's for appetizing ingredients and big savings, like $600 in digital coupons and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump. Dillon's, fresh for everyone.
Shop local, dine local, and love local at Fairlawn Plaza.
Enhance your natural beauty. Keep your car sparkling, your barbecue sizzling, and your footwear refreshed. Fashion for work and play.
Dive into a new artistic pursuit.
Indoor and outdoor events that support the community.
Explore exciting new spots for meals and snacks. You'll find it all at Fairlawn Plaza.
Hey, this is Ryan with Certified Fireplace. Just one second. During our inspection, we found that the Joneses family was having over 150,000 BTUs of carbon monoxide vented directly into their home because of their defective system. Today, we're bringing safety and peace of mind back to the Joneses. When's the last time you've had your chimney inspected?
When a big truck made an illegal U-turn, the inevitable crash caused Melissa to suffer devastating injuries to her face.
Then, to make things worse, the shady trucking company closed up shop and ran.
There's no way I could have made it through it without Devon James.
Melissa, we knew that you were wronged and deserved justice.
You guys were amazing, and the money you got me was life-changing.
You deserved it, and it was our honor to help. Call us at Devon James and find out what we can win for you.
What's for dinner? Shop Dillon's for appetizing ingredients and big savings, like $600 in digital coupons and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump. Dillon's, fresh for everyone.
Welcome back. We're turning now to the fight to keep national heritage areas alive in Kansas. More than 200 Kansas museums and historical parks are facing big budget cuts. Congress has yet to release federal funding for the nation's 62 national heritage areas, and some local sites are struggling because of it. Freedom's Frontier is the national heritage area that encompasses hundreds of sites in both Kansas and Missouri. A representative for the NHA says a lack of federal funding could cause it to shut down, causing smaller sites to lose staffing and halt education programs. We met with a spokesman for Freedom's Frontier, and he tells us the NHA has received federal funding for nearly 40 years. However, this year they're expecting to get none.
The hardest hit sites are going to be the small rural sites, the ones that are passion projects, that are volunteer run, that don't have outside funding or a large budget. These are family operations that do this out of a true love for what they do.
Freedom's Frontier typically receives $500,000 annually from the federal government. And John, Kansas Democrat Sharice Davids joining a fellow congressman in sending this letter asking Congress to not delay funding for these historic sites across the country. In Kansas, that includes sites like the Brown v. Board site and then the Kendara Ruins, which was recently designated as a national site with ties to the Underground Railroad. Do you think we could see Republicans here also speak out on this? And what impact could this lack of funding have for some of these sites economically?
Well, yes, I think we could see some Republicans speak out, especially in areas like Kansas, where there's a story about the Civil War and the end of slavery to tell. And if they don't get money, they basically won't have the staff to do their programs and might have to, close some of these areas down or limit their hours, or you show up to visit and you can look at a building or something like that, but not go inside and see a historical display. And in some ways that would be a shame, because there's a lot of interesting places in Kansas tied to the history of the Civil War and before and after. So, and everybody can learn from that history. So.
Okay, we're also seeing the Supreme Court upholding Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors, in Kansas having a similar law that's now being challenged in the courts. How could this decision from the Supreme Court affect what we're seeing here in Kansas?
Well, Chris Kobach, the Attorney General, says it gives him another avenue for arguing that the state law is acceptable. It's not a violation of anybody's due process rights. The ACLU has told me it's not going to affect their case at all. They're arguing under the state constitution, and their argument is the state constitution's protections are broader. Actually, the Supreme Court said that in an abortion case. We don't know, of course, whether they would apply that in this case when it comes to essentially regulating medicine.
John, thank you so much. Sure. The election season now heating up. State Senator Cindy Holscher now in the hot seat. She's running for governor next year, which she says some of her top priorities are. That's coming up. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Grace Med Health Clinic is your home for complete, compassionate care. From medical visits to vision screenings, dental care, behavioral health support, and a fully equipped pharmacy, we're here to meet all your health needs. Our dedicated team of providers and staff work together to make every visit welcoming and stress-free. Because at Grace Med, you're not just a patient, you're part of our family. Call 785-861-8800 to schedule your appointment. Grace Med Health Clinic, compassionate care for all.
We pray for those who will hear and those we hope will one day listen. We pray for everyone who will bear witness and those who are waiting to see. We pray for everyone on every part of earth to know the freedom of Christ, for his kingdom to come closer than ever. Join us.
I got hurt in a car wreck, and some aggressive insurance guy wants me to sign some papers. I said stop, and I called DM Law.
Be careful. The insurance company wants to pay you as little as possible. We want to get you the most money possible. So stop, think, and don't sign anything until you call us first.
DM Law got me $375,000 for my car wreck. Mike's got this.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, call me. I've got this.
Call 785-444-4444.
Next live from Marvel Studios Ironheart.
So, are you in or out?
Anthony Ramos. And bargains for a beach day.
This is amazing.
Monday at 11 on 27 KSNT.
Welcome back. We're turning now to the campaign trail. State Senator Cindy Holscher throwing her name in the hat for governor on the Democrat side. And I asked her where she stands on education in Kansas, a hot topic for Republicans and Democrats heading into next year's election, and how she plans to address Medicaid expansion with strong pushback from GOP leaders. How do you feel about how the current administration has handled education, and what would you do differently if it was under your administration?
Yeah, education's been a priority, and it should continue to be a priority. The concern, and this is what voters are expressing to me, is that we have a legislature full of extremists type individuals who have been pushing really to destroy public education and to defund. And that's a big concern. We will need somebody in place in the governor's office to push back against those policies, to protect the interest of Kansans and protect public education so there's access for everyone.
I know that Kansas faces a growing demand for skilled workers. So what's your approach to expanding career technical education and vocational training in high schools and community colleges to prepare students for in-demand jobs?
Yeah, it's all part of the pieces of the pie, so to speak, to ensure that we have the right things in place for whatever a student wants to do, whether it be technical, whether they go the other route of, traditional college. But again, we just have to make sure that we have all those different alternatives in place to ensure that students are ready for that next step when they graduate high school.
I know that you've opposed school vouchers, school choice initiatives, but what about Republicans that do say that, it gives parents and students that freedom to exercise where they want to go in terms of their education and have a little bit more freedom in that area? So tell me, what would you say to those people who may disagree with you?
We already have the freedom to go where we want and to send our kids to whichever schools we want. Additionally, within our own school districts, often students will seek a different high school or a different school to attend. So we already have school choice. And again, parents are free to choose whichever avenue they want, whether it be private, public, or homeschooling. And that's not an issue at all. The problem is when we start using public funds for private entities. And in many cases with some of these voucher programs, there are no guardrails. Some of the programs we've seen established in other states like Arkansas, Arizona. And the big concern is that while it is marketed in terms of helping children escape a school that may have some struggles, ultimately what happens is 70% of those vouchers go to families where children were already attending private school, and often these are six-figure families. So it isn't really about helping the children in terms of getting to a different school, again, because 70% of those vouchers end up going to families, again, of higher income level, already going to private schools.
When you said that, we already have the choice to, or parents have the choice to decide to go to a different school if they wanted to, open enrollment was something that recently passed in past legislative sessions, and that would have been considered a school choice initiative by Republicans. Would you agree then with that school choice initiative that was put in place, open enrollment?
It was something that was pushed that, again, along the vein of having more options there. The problem is that it is pretty burdensome for our school districts and trying to, make estimates in terms of how many students are coming in and what their needs are. So, like I said, overall, that's the biggest issue in terms of the extra time that it requires for our local school districts to invest with often what are very unknown factors in terms of who's going to be coming in the next year.
All right, in terms of Medicaid expansion, I know you support expanding Medicaid to cover more Kansans. How will you work with the legislature, though, especially a Republican-controlled legislature, to pass Medicaid expansion, and what would it mean for rural hospitals and their access to care?
It would mean a lot in terms of the fact that we already have 26 hospitals that are financially teetering. So not only would it be economically beneficial, but obviously it helps in terms of our Kansans and healthcare and having access. So, you know, when you talk about too, you know, what can I do in terms of working with a Republican legislature? I have had bills pass nearly every session, and of course, every year there's been either a supermajority or a regular majority of Republicans. You know, I just work to find ways to establish relationships, to be able to work with legislators across the aisle on things that we have in common. And a number of those things are, again, in terms of promoting the interest of Kansans and what they want. So, like I said, I've been able to do that over the years. We brought forward very transformational changes to the statute of limitations rules in Kansas to allow victims of sexual violence a longer time frame to bring their case forward. Last year I had the Purple Alert bill that was brought forward and passed. So again, it's just part of the life of being able to work and collaborate with others.
When it comes to Medicaid expansion, though, that's something that's been shot down repeatedly by Republicans in the legislature. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So how would you work with them to find maybe even alternatives to address this issue?
Yeah, you know, we do have elections, of course, coming up next year where every House position will be on the ballot. Now, we don't know what's going to happen there. The change of a few seats really can change the direction of the overall legislature. So again, just because this is how it looks today doesn't necessarily mean that's how it will look after the election.
Okay, so you're confident that more seats would be picked up by Democrats in this upcoming election as opposed to what happened in 2024?
I think it's quite possible. You know, there are still moderates out there who often seek seats. We'll see if they will in 2026. But as long as we have reasonable people working on behalf of the citizens, we can make some things happen.
Taxes also playing a role in next year's election. Hal Holscher says she plans to lower costs for families when we come back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Hi, I'm Evan with Noller Ford. I'm here with the F-150 pickup, that #1 selling half-ton in America. This beauty offers the XLT Black Appearance Package Plus, so you get the upgraded 20-inch gloss black wheels, up to 13,500 pounds of towing, available in a 2.7, a 3.5 hybrid if you like better gas mileage, or a 5.0 V8. Come on down to Noller Ford. For a limited time only, we have better than employee pricing for all, and we have a great selection of new F-150s like this one right here. Come down and see us.
For your home and your range, Bad Boy mowers will tame any terrain. Give me a home. Designed with advanced engineering and fueled by power that's second to none. And the skies are not cloudy all day. Home on the range. Bad Boy, mow with an attitude.
When you're on a motorcycle, wearing the right gear is the way to stay safe. You dress for the slide, not for the ride. But after a crash, you really got to protect yourself. Call Devon James.
No matter how nice the insurance adjuster seems, don't be fooled. They're not on your side.
But we are. We fight to get all the compensation you deserve.
After a motorcycle crash, wise up and lawyer up. Devon James wins. Call or text 888-8888.
To everyone who finds joy in a great meal, we'd love to see you at Culver's.
What makes us happy is making you happy.
Our menu is handcrafted to have something for everyone.
Everyone.
My favorite, the Butter Burger Deluxe.
Definitely cheese curds.
Chocolate frozen custard.
From the juiciest bites to the sweetest scoops.
We'll make all your favorites fresh.
Fresh.
Fresh, just for you.
From Wisconsin with love.
Welcome to Delicious.
Yeah.
Democrat Cindy Holscher is one of the latest names running for Kansas governor in 2026. Taxes promising to be a big item this year. Some arguing that property tax relief is taking a back seat. I asked Holscher what she would do differently to get Kansans some relief. You've said that state tax policy isn't real fair to regular Kansans. What tax reforms do you propose to make Kansas's tax system more equitable? For example, maybe adjusting income taxes, property tax relief, or even removing some loopholes. What would you say?
You know, what we need really is a task force to study our taxes, because here's what happens every year. Every year, legislators will bring forward their pet projects. some type of an exemption for somebody back home or a certain entity. And what we've got now is just this kind of cobbled situation where we have all these various exemptions that maybe some of them don't really make sense. But again, we need a task force to really study that and make recommendations, because when you put it all together, we do come up with a somewhat unfair system. And we need a system that benefits, that is fair to everybody, versus in what we have now, kind of, like I said, this cobblestone approach that sometimes is tilted in favor of the wealthiest.
What would you say that would be a proposal that you would bring up in the next legislative session to address some of those tax issues when it comes to property tax relief, especially something that a lot of voters are looking for?
Yeah, we had several bills introduced last year. Unfortunately, the only one I believe that moved forward, that made it across the finish line, I believe only gave $25 on average in terms of property tax. I don't think that's what the voters had in mind. And like I said, there were other proposals out there. Those were not granted a hearing. And I think this is what is really important for voters to know. There is a supermajority of the GOP. They can pass any bill they want. And while that was mentioned during elections last year in terms of property tax reform, it apparently wasn't the priority during session because there were other bills that were pushed on other topics. But when it came to property tax, again, they had the numbers to pass anything they want. And all we were given essentially is that one bill that has $25 of savings. So I think voters need to ask, was that really a priority? Looking at the fact that with the numbers they have, it wasn't delivered upon.
It seemed that initially, though, Democrats were hesitant to move on any sort of tax cuts this year, especially just because of the amount of tax cuts that we saw in the past legislative session. And so I wonder, what is the balance there for you when it comes to tax cuts and also balancing the budget?
Yeah, I mean, I know at the beginning of session 2 there was some hesitancy because we were watching revenue as it was coming in and getting to the revenue estimates and certain timing to ensure that things were looking okay. And really that's what it is, knowing what's coming in, knowing how much you're spending. I will say the budget process at times this year was very uncomfortable because that was an approach where again, it felt like things were being cobbled together without a whole lot of attention sometimes by leadership in terms of the overall bottom line and the impact. And you have to take that into consideration. Again, you've got to be watching the revenue coming in. You've got to be watching what you're putting out there. I used to do budgets for a living, working in operations. And like I said, there are some very basic rules that we as a legislative body need to adhere to better.
On the Republican side right now, we're hearing a lot about implementing almost Doge here in Kansas. I think we've heard a little bit of talks of that in the past legislative session as well. But now even more on the campaign trail about looking into government spending and seeing where we can be more efficient there. What would you say to people who want to do that?
We are always looking for efficiencies. We have tight budgets with our agencies and various departments, so of course they are looking for efficiencies and making sure they're not wasteful. The problem, though, is that while that is what Doge has been purported to be, a way of looking for efficiencies, when it comes down to it, it's just been an attack primarily on agencies and departments that serve our communities and serve our people, while at the same time eliminating critical jobs. So again, the focus has not been necessarily in the area of efficiencies. It's been more in the area, again, of removing critical services to our communities.
If you were elected, what would be your first legislative goal to advance your vision for Kansas? And then also, what would be the long-term goals toward the end of your term?
Oh gosh, to ensure we have that revenue stability, to invest in our schools and important infrastructure like our roads and highways. The big concern is that there have been some plans and some bills passed that, if those stay in place, will put our state in a deficit, which over many years we have worked again to get back to a stable situation. But with some of those policies that have been passed by the supermajority, in the future, it puts us in a very concerning position. So we have to be looking at those plans and what needs to be done again to ensure we have that revenue stability so we can invest in our schools, our roads and highways, and the things that are important to our communities and our people.
And that was your look inside Kansas politics. We'll see you right here next Sunday, same time, same place. Have a good day.